Great. Thank you very much. Everybody have a good lunch? All right. Excellent. Well, thank you for joining us for this second panel. The title of the panel is The Role of Technology in Disrupting Philanthropy. So I think we already heard a little bit about some of the disruption happening in the philanthropic space, which is pretty exciting. My name is Chris Fisher. I'm with Click Ventures. I'm a managing partner at Click. So we're not really in philanthropy, quite frankly. We invest in very young startup companies, typically in some kind of technology space, often utilizing the internet or mobile type applications to establish things like marketplaces or places where people exchange value. Think of things like Uber, think of things like some of the social media platforms that we have, some advertising technology platforms. So something not exactly philanthropy, but through my efforts in investing and working with young entrepreneurs and people with excitement and passion and a desire to change the world, I got very much involved. I've always had an interest in social issues, and I started to see the possibilities for things like impact investing to bring the kind of discipline and the kind of ideas and creativity that are often associated with the startup world, bringing those into trying to solve social problems, environmental problems, other issues, try to disrupt the kinds of things that were being addressed with philanthropy, trying to improve the efficiency of philanthropy, or trying to even displace philanthropy and really find market-based types of solutions for these kind of endemic problems that have proven intractable in a lot of cases. So that's what led me into impact investing. I'm based in Hong Kong. We established a group in Hong Kong that focused specifically in trying to promote impact investing among the young people in Hong Kong, and also among the people who had capital, who had the kind of resources, networks, direct contact with social problems, to try to bring these pieces all together, to engage that youthful spirit and innovative spirit towards trying to find sustainable long-term solutions to some of these problems. In many cases, we were specifically looking for situations where you could actually have alignment of incentives to even create profitable long-term opportunities for people to have jobs actually solving problems as a side effect. So that's kind of my history, and for that reason, I'm actually really excited to be on this panel. I think this panel is for me, the most exciting panel of the whole conference, although the first panel also impressed me a lot. I learned a lot there too. But this panel, you'll see, the composition is really, it's remarkable. Right now, we're going to move away from some of the other innovations and really get into some of the deeper, longer-term technological trends that are affecting us. I think you probably have heard in just popular media and things like that there are a lot of nonlinear things happening in the world. A lot of this is being driven by technology and the implementation of technology and networks and network effects. So one of the things people often predict that longevity is changing and that the birth rate is reducing, but people are living longer. This trend generally didn't start at all until about the 19th century. People's life expectancy was pretty much staying the same. Now we're seeing major disruption and a major trend in health tech, medical technologies, the quality, and a lot of the issues that United Way and other wonderful organizations are addressing to help people live longer, more productive lives. I think this is a very positive trend. I don't think anybody would deny that. But it's also affecting a lot of other aspects of our lives, including the future of work, for example. Some people would project that the median life expectancy of anyone under 15 years old at this time would be well over 100 years old. Face that. I mean, that's one opinion. There's many opinions. But the reality seems to be in alignment with that. And then you have other people even saying that maybe we won't even, maybe we'll solve death. Maybe we'll have indefinite lifespan, or at least the ability to influence it dramatically. Now, so, I mean, wherever you fall on that spectrum, I think it's pretty undeniable that in most countries, people are living longer. There's been some slight setbacks in some actually relatively developed countries. But so then this is also challenging the future of work, which challenges the future of education. If you live to be 100 years old, how many careers will you have? Especially when you factor in the basic fact that technological improvements are driving the cycles to be shorter and shorter. So where it used to take multiple decades to go from the invention of electricity to being uniformly distributed throughout everyone's household, now you're seeing technologies like the iPhone come out and everyone has it, even in far-flung places in the world, within a decade, 2 decades, just absolute permeation. So with these trends accelerating, then also careers must logically accelerate as well. And then we have other issues that are in the news, things like the internet and privacy and transparency, and the role of Google and Facebook and things like that in our daily lives. These aspects are actually creating some clever new ways of engaging and creating communities and bringing resources to solve problems. They're also having another effect where they're also creating a situation where it's very easy for even bad ideas to proliferate rapidly. So these are things we're struggling as a society, I believe, to deal with. But this global transfer of ideas, both good ideas and bad ideas, I believe will only accelerate. Some of the good ideas that I'm really positive and excited about, stuff like the lean startup methodologies and the kind of the ability for someone with an idea to engage resources, whether they be financial resources from venture capitalists and philanthropists, whether it be people who have time and have passion and energy, whether it be, and basically being able to organize these groups relatively dynamically and coordinate organization across national boundaries, across political affiliations, across religion, to basically solve problems. There's also some core technologies just in the world that have an impact on how we solve a lot of these problems that I think is very positive from a social and environmental impact standpoint. Things like cloud services, things like Salesforce.org and Salesforce.com, things like AWS and Ali Cloud. These kind of buzzword things are things that didn't exist 30, 40 years ago, where now somebody with an idea can go out and try to solve that problem with relatively limited resources. So it's a very lean way of doing these things. And there's also a lot of free stuff, like from Google and from even Microsoft, and that if you're trying to solve a social problem where you can get a lot of free stuff, and you can collaborate globally, really almost for free, whereas in my growing up day, we used to pay a couple of US dollars a minute for a phone call, out of the country. So this stuff is all great. And again, on the bad side, there is still some things like terrorism and fake news, which also now globally can take root. But overall, I try to be optimistic. And in the venture space, we look at trying to fund those ideas which are going to help make things better. So from that perspective, then, I think that there's 2 main areas, just to give some context for the discussion that's about to follow. There's 2 areas where I see a lot of potential disruption in the philanthropic space. One area is fundraising. So those trends that I mentioned before impact fundraising. And you see young people that grow up with these technologies and with the direct interaction globally with large groups of people, that there's a higher interest in directing their giving and directing their attention and solving problems where they feel almost a direct interaction with the people solving the problem and, most importantly, the people affected by the solution. So young people, I believe, to some extent think differently, and they have a higher expectation, and they have higher belief in something like crowdfunding, for example, or donor-directed giving. This, I think, gives them a sense of meaningfulness, a sense of ownership, which I find that is actually very positive. It's a bit of a challenge compared to the old models, but I think it's very, very positive because it seems to have a much deeper interaction, a much deeper activation among these people. There's also, these people are affected towards the general trends of like wellness, awareness, a desire for meaningfulness in life, and wanting to have ownership. So I think that as we think about disruption in philanthropy and the future of philanthropy and how technology will affect that, I think it's very important we think about the needs of the people who we are trying to help, and then also the needs of the people who want to give and help those people. And think about it very much like a traditional marketing problem, more so than an older kind of just giving type mindset. So also, in addition to the changes in the kind of people who will be sources of funding, there's also been some interesting innovations in terms of finance, things like impact bonds that allow us to transfer the risk of implementing, risky new social ideas or social science to help to transfer some of that risk into the private sector and engage entrepreneurs and people who are solutions-oriented to get in there, roll up their sleeves, give them the kind of funding that they need to try something new around this type of social science and try to measurably impact things. And I think a lot of the measurement is another continuing theme that you'll see across a lot of the future of philanthropy, how that's going to help us to drive more efficient allocation of capital into this sector. So that's one aspect, is basically fundraising. And on the other side, I think the execution of the mission is actually another amazing, very exciting area of potential. You probably have heard some of the buzzwords. I mean, in venture capital, we talk about them all the time because we're so much interested in these spaces. But things like ed tech, education technology, things like med tech, medical technology or medical device technology, things like health tech, which is more general, helping people to have healthy lives. Fintech, which helps us move money around and helps us to do some poverty alleviation and bank the unbanked and things like that. These areas are all evolving very, very rapidly, and this is really relatively new. And it's enabled by the kinds of technologies that my venture firm invests in. So I'm seeing it every day, and I'm very excited about the possibility of all these things. And then we also see, in addition to the lean startup methodology, which I mentioned before, which allows people to be relatively lean and not require as many resources to do this stuff, there's also things like gamification, things like blockchain coming down the road. And then there's also just the ubiquitous availability of mobile platforms, which right now is not exactly ubiquitous, but with the level of adoption in the developed world, it's driving the cost down dramatically so that putting a simple iPhone-like device becomes much more realistic in the medium to longer term in even the most poverty-afflicted areas. So with that context, I think I've got the best panel I could even imagine for this discussion. It's extremely diverse, and so I'm really excited to have this conversation in this context. We've got basically we've got a big company, we've got a small company, we actually have a startup company, we've got a consulting firm who's helping in the philanthropic area. We also have a blockchain and an engineer. We have someone from Korea, someone from China, someone from California, someone from Malaysia, and myself from Hong Kong. We have a CSR professional, we have consultant, entrepreneur, engineer. So we really have a very diverse group in these four people in this moderator. So I'm super excited to introduce this panel. So I'm just going to say their name, and then essentially we will do similar to the first panel format. Each person will get up, give a brief presentation. We'll have a couple of questions among the panel, open it up to some thoughts. If we still have time at the end, I'll do maybe a speed round where we have some quick reactions to some statements and questions. And so that'll be the format of this panel. So first to my immediate right on the stage, or your left, is Sunju Lee. She's the Senior Vice President and Head of Sustainability Management Unit for Korean Telecom Company, which is the big company, and she's based in Seoul. We also have In Chun. In is based in Shanghai mostly. He is a partner from Bain and Company, the consulting firm he's also working in their corporate social responsibility area and working closely with United Way, which I'm sure he'll tell you something about. We also have Soojin Lee, who's the co-founder and CEO of Inuma. which is a very exciting startup, which is doing the kind of scalable technology-based stuff that I, as a venture capitalist, absolutely love, and which I think is the future for a certain class of impact investing. And then we have Lan Wong, who is the founder of Proxima X, and he's the former president of the Nem Coin Foundation, Nem.io Foundation, who has been involved from the very early days in blockchain. So this is the panel. Please give him a quick round of applause, and then great, thank you. And we'll jump right in with Sanju.
Yes, good afternoon to you all, and thank you very much for having me here today. My name is Sanjuri, and I'm the Senior Vice President and the head of the Sustainability Management Unit for Korea Telecom. Many people asked me what's the role of Sustainable Management Unit, and I'm in charge of CSR and CSV program in KT Group. It is such an honor and meaningful occasion for me to speak with you at our Asia-Pacific Philanthropy Summit. Today, I am delighted to discuss how KT has breakthrough traditional philanthropy models and advanced the UN SDGs through technology innovation. As the biggest telecommunication company in Korea, KT is innovating new technologies and leading advanced technology trends around the world. As our latest example of breakthrough, KT successfully demonstrated 5G technology in the Pyeongchang Winter Olympics last February. Now let me introduce how KT has innovated new ways to creating shared value. In 2 words, it is our Giga story. And our Giga story is how we have used our infrastructure and ICT solutions to make a better society. Our goal is to empower people and reduce regional inequalities. And since 2014, KT has done this by building 6 gigastories in remote islands and isolated villages in Korea. The first gigastory in Korea was launched in Imja Island, and was the first of its kind in Korea to use ICT in a remote island. In this program, we provided education, health, and economic opportunities to disadvantaged and especially elderly groups. After this story, our gigastory expanded surprisingly fast to 5 more regions within 3 years. For our one international gigastory, KT collaborated with the government of Bangladesh and NGO, International Organization for Migration, and the KOICA, Korea International Corporate Agency. This initiative improved the quality of life for island residents through KT's high-speed giga network by improving public services and access to information in Moeshkali Island, Bangladesh. Then, how did this project contribute to better quality of life for people in our gigastories? KT has improved the quality of life in 3 major areas: health, education, and economy. In consultation with Yonsei Medical Laboratories in Korea, KT has been able to provide improved digital healthcare solutions in remote areas and disadvantaged regions. Elderly people can receive health checkups via mobile devices and send their results to medical institutions in near cities. Also, pregnant women in Moeshkali now don't go to off island to see a doctor. Doctors can help them to give birth safely with precise medical assistance. In this picture, you can see the IT education space classroom in the most traditional village in Korea, 청학동. Through a virtual broadband bridge, village children can receive high-quality education without unnecessary relocation. Also, KT video conferencing solution K-Box improves these children to connect the teachers in other cities. We are so happy to hear from students in Moeshkali that their English is getting better and with KT's digital education platform. Many disadvantaged students now take IT education in this classroom, getting one step closer to their dreams. And KT's smart farm technologies used in Baekneung Island help residents to enjoy fresh produce year-round regardless of the weather. In Bangladesh, our e-commerce solutions help farmers to connect directly with consumers. Farmers are better off selling directly to retail customers via an e-commerce portal site. KT's broadband network ultimately acts as a powerful lever for achieving better jobs and economic growth. Can you imagine that a large number of island farmers previously out of the world can sell their produce in e-markets and never existed before? You are now creating a space while young island innovators will soon be able to sell their products worldwide. KT is doing far more than breaking through traditional philanthropy models. You are using our technology to change them. I would like to share one of KT's commercial video clip, which shows KT's 5G network for better safety in Korea.
엔진 상공들입니다. 배에서 불이 났습니다. 빨리 와서 구조 좀 해주세요.
몇 분 일이야? 인터넷 해야 될지 몰라. 한 명 더 붙여요.
현재 해무로 인해 시야가 3m 이내로 나오고 있습니다. 타이즈 먼저 출동시키겠습니다. 현재 통신망 복구했습니다.
상방 위치 확인됐습니다.
복부에 출혈이 과다하게 발생하고 있습니다. 영상을 송출하겠습니다.
현장 구조대원분들 그 환자 출혈 부위를 최대한 압박하셔야 됩니다.
KT는 5G 기술로 권역 외상센터, 해양경찰청과 함께 국가재난 안전망 발전에 앞장서고 있습니다. 대한민국을 위한 오늘의 기술. KT.
Yeah, it is not a movie, it's a commercial video clip. At the KT, our vision of philanthropy is to bring technology and people together. The clip you just watched is exciting and active, and I really like it. We have gotten a lot of positive responses from it because it shows how we are actually using our technology to help people at times they need in the most. As a leading technology leader, KT will continue to improve the ways we can all continue more the philanthropy and a better society. It has been a pleasure for me to speak with you today. Thank you.
네, 강연에 힘써주신 죄송합니다. 네, 계속해서 잠시만요. 네, 베인 앤 캠퍼니 파트너사의 인채님께서 강연을 해주시도록 하겠습니다. 여러분 큰 박수로 맞아주시기 바랍니다.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you. My name is Ian Chen. I'm a partner with Bain and Company in Shanghai. It's a pleasure and an honor for me to be here with you today. Just a quick introduction on Bain. We're a global management consulting firm in China. We work mainly with both MNCs as well as with local companies. That's my day job. On top of that, we also have a social impact practice, which is part of our way of giving back. And we've had this privilege of working with Ming as well as Yuan Jiakai recently on a study, which we'll be publishing towards the end of the year on the topic here, which is China digital philanthropy. So being a good consultant, my role here today is to share a few highlights and some of the fact base of what is the landscape in China. We see the headlines, the growth stories, the big things, but what do we see from a third-party perspective of both the opportunities as well as the challenges? So I'm going to share an excerpt of the report today, and then we can discuss with the team in the following session. So just a quick overview of the history of the philanthropy market in China. I think we would really say the start of it started in 1981, 3 years after the opening up of the Chinese economy, where the first foundations were established. But really, in terms of when we have good data, really starting to build the foundation would be around 2007, which is where there's more of a growth period in between. But from 2007 to 2010, there was quite a few fluctuations driven mainly by two events, natural disasters. So in 2008, there's the Wenchuan earthquake, which saw a rise in donations. And then in 2010, there was a Yushu earthquake as well. Since then, from 2011 to 2015, there continued to be a steady rise in total donation value. But now we're entering a more mature stage of development, where in 2016 the first charity laws were passed in China, and now there's more of a hand within how will the evolution of the market continue and how will it develop. But it's seen strong growth, as you see from the figures here. 29% earlier in the phases, and now getting to more of around a 7% growth rate. As we look at comparisons, just to put China into context, and here's one example of China versus the US. And of course, there's many reasons why it shouldn't be compared this way, but just to put some numbers and figures here, China roughly is about 1/20th the size of the US donation market, 150 billion RMB versus about 2.6 billion RMB in the US. Within that, the structure of the market is also remarkably different, with China being mainly dominant by corporations, with 65% of total donation value coming from corporations, while only 21% coming from individuals. In absolute numbers, the 65% from corporations is similar to the 5% in corporate donations on the US side. It's really the magnitude of the individuals. And there that we do have some differences in terms of structure, in terms of the tax laws, et cetera. But it puts into scale and perspective the size of the difference. But the opportunity in China is also significant. On the right-hand side, we see that despite China being already number 4 in terms of total number of donations, the number of donors in the world, that it's still kind of only 7% of the total population in terms of penetration. So if you look across from the number 1 to number 9, whether it becomes a 20% participation rate or a 50%, there's still significant incremental opportunity here. The way we see the market, and we wanted to frame it this way, is traditionally the market is around finding the donors and making the connection, to then the fundraising act, to then the operations. For the topic of digital, the idea is how is this being disrupted and changed in the new technology phase? First of all, it is happening in two ways. From the connections, there is much more avenues in terms of tools to just have individuals and corporations directly involved and to build connections with individuals throughout the value chain. That also now is the rise of fundraising as an online platform. And so here, and this would be the focus of really the next few pages, which is what we've focused on, that this is the new growth engine that we're seeing in China with online platforms. There's currently 20 that have licenses in China now. Still a very small, and I'll show you some numbers in a few minutes, relative share of the total donation value, but it's unlocking some of those opportunities you saw on the previous slide from an individual participation perspective. Some of the new and later technologies are the bottom here. And this is what one of my fellow panelists will talk about Lon later. But this is much further away. Right? In terms of the development, what we see is digital marketing and tools are being applied. Online platforms is already there, and they're growing rapidly. But there is also testing and learning in a much more kind of startup-y environment around blockchain, around cloud computing, and how could it be applied to not just philanthropy, but across sectors, and philanthropy being one of them. But those are a few years away probably from where China is now. If we double-click just on online fundraising now, so this is that perspective, using the 2017 values of donation, so China roughly 160 billion RMB in total donation value, and then the line in the sand we've drawn here is what is online versus offline. 98% of total donation value still comes from offline channels. Online is still only roughly 2%. It's grown rapidly. So from 13 to 16, this was growing at 75% per year. It's now growing at 30% per year, but it's off of a significantly smaller base. And so this is just to say online, and we see more of it, especially with Ali and Tencent being the major players in online. There's a lot of publicity, and it's good for them to put it out there. But in terms of relative order of magnitude, it's still quite small. But what are these market characteristics? So as we summarize, I think, and look at the landscape, there's a few kind of 6 things that we're summarizing through. First, digital is now activating individual donations. So 65% of online donations are coming from individuals versus, if you remember just 2 slides back, that idea of 21% of total donations come from individuals. So now online is helping unlock a channel that before had not been participating so actively. That's driven by, and what Chris was alluding to, young donations, right? The millennial generation, the post-90s, the post-2000s, they're engaging a lot more. And as we think about stakeholders in this value chain, from corporations to the NGOs, these are the kind of must-wins to get them engaged and involved, not just the first time, but also as we think about the market evolution, how to keep them engaged over the lifetime and build that culture of philanthropy. Third, in terms of the platforms themselves, so we didn't show here, but on the online, that total value, 95% of that value still comes from 2 platforms. One is Tencent and one is Ali. But there's 20 that have licenses that can participate. The rest of the 18 split the remaining 5%. And there's a reason for that. Tencent and Ali both have significant amount of weight, but they also have an ecosystem that they can bring in already, that they have both the payment as well as the traffic. However, what we see from at least the government policies and in the approvals, the Ministry of Civil Affairs, the MCA, is continuing to approve new online players, and especially to kind of continue adding. So we would say that the landscape is not necessarily set in stone. If you look across industries, whether it's B2B, B2C, China does still follow the top 2, 3 will kind of take an oligopolic share of the total market, but it's not saying that within philanthropy it has to be Tencent and Ali, but they have taken a first mover position. Number 4, I think in terms of NGOs and individuals, they're increasingly encouraged and empowered to leverage online fundraising. And so the fundraising and the platforms here is more equivalent to the crowdsourcing. It is not monthly donation. It is project by project based to receive funding from online. And therefore, it's increasingly important. Traditionally, the channel had to come through a lot of the donations, especially offline from corporations, would have to come through a larger foundation to be funneled to an NGO. But now with online, there's more openness and ability to directly reach out to the donors, that activation. The challenges that poses that right now, how do these NGOs manage an online presence? And we see this not even just in philanthropy and NGOs, but even with our corporate companies, how do they manage online is increasingly a topic that we're helping them struggle with. But number 5, on online projects themselves, if you look at any of the platforms and then we look at the distribution of projects, the Pareto effect very clearly is there, where the top 20% of the projects will get the bulk, 80%, 90% of all of the funding. And there's many that are there. It's 2 reasons. Some of that is a kind of push as well as a pull. But part of that is also, as we speak to some of the smaller NGOs, they don't have the capability, the resources. They don't necessarily know how to play this game. So how can organizations and how do they see a step change to really be able to penetrate that channel is a question for these NGOs. And then the last point, and linking it back to the UN kind of as Sustainable Development Goals, the three main areas that are currently being kind of funded online really are led by still government policy from the China perspective. You know, poverty alleviation, health, and then there are some cultural elements. Education, given the importance of education both in Korea as well as in China, those tend to be the top funded projects. And this is both from a pull of the donors themselves, but also the push of the platform and what they're trying to demonstrate. I think it is important to note that at this point, part of this is to demonstrate that they're following through on the policies and the objectives of what the Chinese government is setting forward. So finally, last slide here is just to say, you know, what we want to put into context is China, as we look at it and the growth and the opportunity, there's a lot about how quickly China has grown, how rapidly it's growing, how it's a leader in digital. And it's absolutely true across the markets and the industries that we work with. But within the philanthropy stage, we're still at the point of trying to engage mass participation, which online starts to unlock. But really, as we move forward, the questions that the whole sector will have to tackle and wrestle with is, right now the online space is project-based crowdsourced funding, essentially. How do we go from project-based to now more building that culture of giving so that there's more sustainable and a more kind of longer-term repeat purchase? These are the good and the bad. The good is that young people are interested in things, they will follow a story, they will click and they will donate. The bad is, how do you track that over time? How do you get them on the next story? How do you continue to build that? And that will be important as we think about the sustainability of the NGOs as well as these online platforms. And at the bottom of this is to say that the infrastructure still needs to be there. So one, the criticality of government policies could swing this many different ways. But right now it is very supportive of online as a channel. Secondly is the technologies themselves, right? Both whether it's online, what some of the new technologies, what could be applied and how to apply it will be something that we need to figure out as a sector. So that's where we are in terms of some of the emerging findings from our report. We will kind of have something much more formalized and structured by the end of the year, so please do look forward to that.
네, 흥미로운 강연 감사합니다. 큰 박수 부탁드립니다. 계속해서 미국 에누마 테크기업 대표 이수인님의 강연이 있겠습니다. 여러분 박수로 환영해 주시기 바랍니다.
Hello, my name is Suin Lee, co-founder and CEO of Enuma. So as a small startup, we are just 30-ish people that is locating in Berkeley, California to Seoul. It's an honor to be with all those great panels and this great event. I believe that our role in here is showing an example of small tech startup and our journey and how it involves with so many different organizations and help and different funding structures. What? Okay. So Enuma is a mission-driven for-profit startup. Sometimes it's like a unmatching word. So we actually started to design for children with special needs, but at the same time, we got up to 9 million investment from mostly for-profit and impact investors. We develop high-quality self-learning solution for really early skills, targeting 7 to 8 years old, typically. We support underserved population, so we started to target children with special needs, but then we expanded it to children who are struggling in traditional school system, and right now it expanded to the children who have a trouble to access quality education in developing countries. We have two different product lines. One is more B2C focused product line, the major product called Todo Math. That is one of the bestseller of Apple App Store with 6 million downloads, quite popular in China, Korea, Japan, and United States. But at the same time, we have a special product called KitKat School that is specially designed for children in developing countries. So when I first to I and my husband, my co-founder, were game developers before. When we first see the edutech field, we can see the quality gap between the most of education product that is designed for smart, well-educated people to the solutions that is given for children who are struggling in learning or earlier grade. And the same pattern is there, especially in developing countries context. So there are 250 million children in the world still cannot read or write. But the problem is 190 million children among them are actually sitting inside of school system. So they are sitting inside of school, meet the teacher every day, sometimes not. But however, the time and years they are spending inside of school doesn't come as a form of education. But there are so many ICT solutions being tried in developing countries. They are usually focused on the targets that already can read or write. So if you see the Tanzanian example, there are only 30% of people enter the early secondary school. But for the large amount of population who are staying in out of school or in primary school situation, there is not many effective ICT solution. But it is where the ICT solution can give the biggest benefit with its scalability. So when we see that problem as a specialist of early childhood ICT program, we can see, oh, if we provide one solution that may give a really large benefit for children who are struggling the most. But our challenge is that require large amount of upfront investment and engineering power and talent and all those resources, but there is a question about the market size, and it is a sizable market, or can a small startup that is sitting in Berkeley or in Seoul can ever approach to that large unknown field called Africa or Southern Asia and developing countries? It started in 2014, actually, to solve that problem of matching and to match demand and the supply. Global Learning X Prize is $15 million competition that started in 2014 and will be ended next year. So it is looking for open source solution that child can teach themselves how to read or write or do basic math on with tablet device only. It was funded by, so it is partnered with X Prize Foundation that is looking for the solution to improve humanity, and UNESCO World Food Program and Tanzanian government, and funded mostly by Elon Musk, the CEO of Tesla. So, but as you see, that large amount of what it is, price, actually can inspire a small startup to challenge to this problem. And also, as a vehicle of change, startups called vehicle of change. So we actually gather all the help we can possibly gather in the world to start this program. So in the first row, in the top row is our investors. Some of them are pure financial investors or strategic investors like Teleducation Group of China or SoftBank Ventures Korea. But some of them are philanthropic VC or impact investors that give their money because we try to close the gap of the world. But they are also looking for a good financial return. In the left side, that is Global Learning X Prize, COICA, CTS program. They are grant programs, so try to find innovative companies and give them money that is not related with equity. Hayground and CoLab are co-working spaces and social impact venture acceleration programs. We got a benefit. As an Ashoka Fellow, I got a great support from Ashoka Network. And the right side is field NGOs that help us to approach to the real people and real situation in a remote area of Africa. So for last 4 years, Kike School was a main product we really working on. So from one of our study that is held in rural area in Tanzania, we compared children who are sitting in the school to children who are out of school situation in 3 months of intensive study. Even though their baseline was far lower than children in the school, children in out of school community center actually show a quite good amount of learning gain. We became a finalist of Global Learning X Prize, so received $1 million, now challenged to $10 million final prize. We got a cumulative 1.4 million grant from KOICA CTS program. We just entered our third stage of KOICA program for $1 million. And we received the funding from Sign On for Literacy Challenges by USAID World Vision and Australian Aid to equip the sign language version of Kiki School for people who are deaf and hard of hearing in Africa. It's a big issue in African countries. And the right side are our partnering NGOs that help us to go to Rwanda, Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania and run a pilot program in local schools and community centers or centers in refugee camps and prove how this can be effective to the real situation and became our customer as they are thinking to expand this program to even larger scale. Okay, so that is some photos from the field. So the importance of self-learning tool is it doesn't require a large amount of preconditions. So to teach children, it mostly requires teacher and textbooks, and teacher is not purchasable with money. It requires 10 years to grow new generation of teachers, and sometimes it's almost impossible to build that ecosystem and pipelines. And many of cases, people actually require some of early childhood development program to start first grade. Not all 7 years old are automatically ready to start first grade level, but some government easily forget about that. So providing the early childhood program with all those first to third grade courses, we can make some tech solution that child just can start without any prior condition, and teacher and community center are totally excited. Okay, so our vision is there can be a digital public education, so the education will flow when they turn on the mobile devices in their hand. Right now, mobile devices are even more popular than the number of schools in the world and more accessible, and I believe that can happen in near future. And actually to provide quality education for all of those people, so many organizations and people worked for the last 100 years and made a great achievement so far. And I believe that there is the part that software developer only can contribute. So we try to provide an effective digital learning solution that all of the players in the field can be successful. And the source code and contents will be released as open source, so to reach to the minor languages and small population areas in the world. And this solution is run on off-the-shelf devices as low as $60. And we apply universal design for learning because there are so many people with special needs or don't come through the early childhood education, still see a really great barrier with even the best education program in the world. And I believe that our other goal is survive, thrive, and keeping up this work. So because it will not happen just in 1 year or 2 years, but as we all see, technology solution actually should be updated continuously. And without that, it will be outdated so soon and will be forgotten, just dusted in the big shelf of some small schools that get donated 60 years ago, but nobody used from the third year. So keeping up with the latest technology is really important, and just find a way to survive or find a way to thrive as a for-profit company. That is our really important goal as a small startup. So that is my story, and thank you very much for hearing.
네, 감사합니다. 큰 박수 부탁드립니다. 네, 계속해서 마지막으로 프록시마 X 대표 론윙님의 강연이 있겠습니다. 론윙님을 연단으로 모시겠습니다. 여러분 큰 박수로 환영해 주시기 바랍니다. Please come to.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I believe the lunch has caused a great deal of disruption to our routine here. A lot of us here seem to be dozing off, and I hope that my presentation here will help you wake up a bit. Okay, I've came here with an objective, and I was told that we should, and I should be looking at how we can come up with a technology that could help in the business of getting charity being well participated by the population at large, because there's an increasingly low participation in as far as the old money is concerned. And the old money is dwindling because a lot of them are retiring. And Chen Yin has given us some light into what is happening in China and what is happening to the rest of at least to the rest of Asia, because Asia is a very young population. And in Europe and North America, you see a population that is, even in Japan, right? A population that is aging with little, it's more like a reverse pyramid sort of thing, right? With respect to the young and the old at the bottom. So what we really need to do, and seeing it from the perspective of an engineer without much knowledge into the business of philanthropy, is that we need to look at it from a magnifying glass outside the box. And that's where I'm coming in from today with just 2 slides from here. But before I proceed to talk about what the blockchain technology can bring about to the changes in the philanthropy domain, I would like to explain a little bit about myself and the business or the technology that I'm involved in. My name is WONG, and I was deeply involved in the blockchain technology for the last 6 years. And one of the things that have come out of this is that in the last 4 years, I was involved in the development of a global scale open source blockchain technology. And because of that, it has given me a lot of in-depth knowledge into the industry, into the technology, and to be able to apply those technology to various industries. And when I started off, and being an engineer, I came in and I studied the blockchain technology. And one of the most important things that came to my mind at the time was that the blockchain technology is very much suited to the financial industry. But the most unfortunate part of it is that as I moved along and did my research into the financial industry and try and find out the disparity that's happening in the financial industry, I found out that after being involved in the blockchain technology for 3 years, I realized that it is a big mountain to climb and a big wall beyond that, because the financial industry is a very much regulated industry, and therefore blockchain technology is irrelevant because you need to scale beyond the regulations and the framework before you can actually make use of that technology and apply it efficiently in the financial industry. So it's a bit of a pity. So moving on from that, I resigned as the president of the NAM.io Foundation just this April, because I thought that should be put in the back burner so that let the financial regulators sort out themselves, their lives, while I pursue with the blockchain technology to other industries that are less regulated or not regulated at all. So the birth of Proxima X. Today, I hate the Proxima X. project, and we are going to push this beyond just the financial industry, the blockchain technology. So I have 2 slides, right? This is the first slide. The next slide, you know I'm finished. So we will keep this short. If you look at transportation, there is the train, there is in the earlier days, the horse carriage, the car, bicycle, motorbike, the plane, the ship, is a host of it. And all this vehicle and transportation means are basically a means to an end, which is to reach from destination A to destination B. And what it is that at times when you want to travel, you don't really care, other than the time involved, about how you're going to move from point A to point B, because that's the means of your end. So moving on from that, if you look at how the collection of donation of gifts is also a means, and that means can come in many different forms, right? It can come in money dropped into the hat or a can, or it could be a wire transfer, it could be a pledge of a check. Whatever the means is, at the end of the day, it's about money going from someone's pocket into the organization that is going to collect those charity or donations from that individual. And if you look at the blockchain technology is a means to an end. And that means is a ledger. And that ledger is a ledger of records of transactions. When we talk about transactions, we talk about a person transacting with another person, and that other person transacting with someone else, and it goes into a whole loop in the ecosystem. And if we do not account for it properly, then we're in trouble, right? And in an organization like the UW, if they don't have a sophisticated accounting system, then they have a problem, because there's lots of money coming in from many directions, and not being able to account for it will mean there's a lot of leakages and a lot of problems associated with it. So the blockchain technology is what we call a very secure ledger, a very secure, very safe. It has what we call immutable records. Immutable records means when a transaction happens, you cannot change it. You cannot change the transaction, and there's no way you can change it, which means it is final. When it's final, there is definitely an audit trail that you can actually follow and trust. And the records are irreversible as well. So if the money is being transacted from one point to another point, so it cannot be reversed. And because it's immutable, that's why you cannot reverse it. So these are the fundamental elements of the blockchain technology, and I have explained that in not too many words, and you don't need to understand the rest of the technology, because, like I said, if you travel from point A to point B, you don't care about how you're being transported. So if you are using the blockchain technology, you don't care what is being used, the technology behind it, which is very powerful and is near rocket science because it's highly mathematical, right? And that's where it protects the sanctity of the ledger that you work on. So extending from that is that what it means is that blockchain allows us to have a fraud-proof management of credits or balance. I did not say anything about crypto coin. Forget about it, because the blockchain is used to manage crypto coin. But the blockchain, by the same token, can be used to manage balance and credits. that can be equated to money that we are so familiar with, right? So basically, as I said, the one word, blockchain is a ledger of records. And with that technology, it also enables us to transact easily. And that's the key point to this. The key point is frictionless transactions, almost frictionless transactions. And that's where the blockchain is most suited for, because it has cut away a lot of the security layers that are otherwise needed for traditional way of managing money. So if we look at how the whole ecosystem can be created or put in place, we need a proper infrastructure. Again, if you look at infrastructure in the traditional sense, like Alipay, Samsung Pay, Apple Pay, Tencent, whatever Pay, their infrastructure are very high in maintenance as well costs. The cost of acquisition is high. And when it comes to blockchain, it's going to smash that. It's going to smash that from an order of 10 times at the least, which means if it costs you $10 million to implement a payment system, it would only cost you probably less than $1 million to roll out the same using the blockchain technology, and more superior than that. So this is where the crux is. So if we look at a typical charity organization, you could actually extrapolate and extend from what Chen Yin has said, that we are increasingly very technology-based in our approach, especially for those who are below 25, and most of us are not here. They are very savvy, and they require to be able to participate, possibly by way of gamification of a contribution. And that's where it will attract them more, so than going through the traditional sense of having to deduct the salary on a monthly basis for the purpose of donation. So we may need to move beyond this. And in simplifying this, and in simplifying the fact that what Chen Yin has said, that we need to be able to go beyond and to be able to actually implement technology in this business, then we need to have a very solid so-called points of deposit. And if in a charity organization is located in, say, 120 different locations around the world, then perhaps maybe we should have 120 points of deposit taking for the purpose of charity. And that's where we, as in a charity organization, is now able to connect with the end user, the donor, through the banking system. And the banking system could mean that it is an Alipay, because Alipay allows an individual to put money into another individual or organization's account via the mobile phone. And that is where the means is. And that means is a regulated industry. We don't disturb that, so that as an organization, as a charitable organization, you don't need to apply for licensing, because you're going to have an account in Alipay or Tencent or Apple Pay or Samsung Pay. And with that account, you collect money. And with that money that you collect, then you would use a ledger, an accounting ledger, to manage this amount of money for that user who has contributed to you. So what it means is that you would use a blockchain technology to manage the money that has been deposited into your account for the user, so that the user can now choose. Now, this is where it's going to be different as well. The user can now choose which project or cause that the charitable organization is going to ask for contribution. So if it's, say, Mexico, for example, right? And I'm here, I have 5 credit points, whether it's in US dollar, denominated in US dollar or pounds or euro dollars or, Korean won, doesn't matter what it is. It's a unit of money that you have deposited, and therefore you would like to now contribute to the problem that's in Mexico. And on that basis, then there are a few things that can happen at the back end, right? So we are now able to study the psychographics, demographics, as well as the types of charity causes that this individual is going to contribute into your projects, your causes. So, and that's where there's a lot of important information that you can mine from users from across the world, all the nations that they are participating in. So this is one thing where the blockchain does a lot of things that you can actually do. So if you have multiple points of collection, and then from there you zoom in to the a central collection point, say in the HQ, say wherever it may be in Hong Kong or in the United States, New York. So that's where all the money gets channeled into a global fund, and it's being managed through the blockchain. And as soon as the organization receives money, the user or the donor would have received a credit on her phone. And when she receives that credit, now she's able to participate. And the good thing about it is that the mobile phone is not just a wallet or just a pay wallet where you can just pay, but inside that wallet, you could have a lot of things happening so that the user can now interact with you as an organization, whether it's in the form of a cause that you want them to contribute or in the form of participation. It's just like a social network, right? It's just like a social, you need to make it exciting for these young people to be able to interact with you. And again, from there, you are now able to gauge what sort of person or the donor could be and how he or she could participate in your programs. So it becomes very interactive and therefore more touching to the person. So this is moving away from how the traditional, I mean, as far as I know, right, I'm not really into philanthropy, unfortunately, but as far as I know, it's about donation to the blind, donation to the, to the underprivileged and mentally challenged people. And I'm always throwing money into some place that I don't know, and I am not comfortable. And that's the very reason why I do not like to contribute. If I know that I can walk to this group and pay, then I know I'm paying to a real cause that I like to contribute to. And with this sort of solution that we have, I think it brings me nearer to being a contributor to all the causes in this world. So I am going to finish off with the next slide. And what it says here is basically I want to have a takeaway line. And that takeaway line is that with blockchain technology, I have not gone deep dive into blockchain technology with the knowledge that it is not necessary, it is about how we're going to implement it and how we're going to do it without understanding exactly what blockchain is. So the takeaway line I have here is about creativity. It is about creativity where the limit is. With blockchain, there's lots more you can do. And what I've done here is to show you just a tip of the iceberg. And the most important thing that we need to do is to be able to establish a base infrastructure. And again, this base infrastructure is not just establishing a base blockchain ledger, because this can extend to more things that you would like to develop. For example, if you want to have records, record keeping is not just value keeping. If we are talking about record keeping via images, via text, and time stamping all these records, right? Actions, programs becomes embedded into the blockchain space. And that is the requirement of a basic infrastructure that will allow you to do your first task, which is management of donations in the form of credit that the user can now use it to donate to specific causes. So, and then, and with this basic infrastructure, you can then slowly extend it to your partners, right? And And your partners, if you don't have partners before, now you can have partners, right? And you can have partners that will do things with you, for you, and together. So this is where the same underlying technology is going to be able to drive that as well as a silo to all your programs. And I need not say more with respect to catering for the young, wider acceptance, because I think Chen has reaffirmed that, affirmed my thoughts. I didn't do any research. He did it for me, and he concluded that, right? So that is what it is. We're going to move towards the young, concentrate on those below 30, and most of them are connected via the mobile phone, or at least via the mobile phone, via the desktop, right? So, so I think at the end of the day, we are all in search of a blue ocean. You know, we are looking at the same old people year in, year out, relying on them to contribute to our causes. But I think we should start to seek new areas of contribution, and these are the young people that we are looking at. I think with that, thank you.
Thank you for your informative lecture. 네, 여러분 큰 박수 부탁드립니다.
Yes, great. Thank you, Lan. Thank you to all the panel members for the introduction. So we're running very tight on time here, so I'm going to try to tie a little bit of that together. So I think if there's one takeaway, one interesting takeaway, so we have these different participants in the ecosystem. We have the large companies who have, frankly, a lot of the resources, and they have a lot of networks and capability to actually deliver into the world solutions to problems. And we also have startups and people bringing new ideas in. And we have consultants who are also helping to advise people and help big companies and even small companies to step back and take a strategic look about how to optimize what they're doing. But what ties it all together, and increasingly in the future, I think, which ties it together a lot more, is technology at different levels. There's different levels of technology, ranging from electricity as a technology that's just had a tremendous positive human impact, all the way to telephones, to communication systems. And blockchain is another, it's the latest buzzword, but it's essentially all of these are in a steady progression towards greater and greater ability for collaboration and coordination. And so I think Lan brings some interesting light into that. And one of the interesting things about blockchain, in the past, to utilize technology was very difficult to coordinate across large groups of people. Even in a company, to implement a IT system was often a nightmare. It was fraught with risk, often failed, often did not achieve the financial or the financial objectives or the outcomes that were desired when you first bought it. It often wasted a lot of money on it. Things have changed in organizations with the cloud and with a lower risk for a lot of these things, and also as consultants and people have really created methodologies and processes, and they've thought very carefully about how to implement these things to reduce the risk and manage it all the way along through the process, so you have better outcomes and lower risk through the process. An interesting thing about blockchain that is new, I think, and it's important, is that now you're seeing massively decentralized efforts. Large groups of people all over the world don't even speak the same language, maybe never met each other, maybe never will. Very much like an open source project back in the 90s and 2000s. This concept has evolved, it continues to evolve, and now it's being applied in blockchain space to an extent that I've never seen before. It's drawing the greatest technological talent, the greatest engineers. People are all rushing into this space. Some for the financial gains, because it was originally a financial innovation, but then it's being applied all over the place. So this potential for having a large global place where everybody can collaborate without anybody having to really agree on anything is truly a transformative technology. So that's kind of one takeaway, how technology kind of glues this together. And so I kind of want to explore a little bit how the big companies and the small companies and everybody and the NGOs and the United Ways of the world can all participate to leverage each other's own unique advantages the resources of a big company, the creativity and the innovation and the risk-taking of a startup type approach, the type of capital and the type of engagement that a United Way can bring in, as well as the advice and the networks and the grassroots delivery capability of a United Way. How do we bring all these together, and how do we use technology to kind of accelerate that process? Lon also hinted at some of the kind of big data, and I'm sorry, and also In-Chen also alluded to, as we do these things in a technological platform, we get more and more better data about who's doing what, who's interested in what works, what doesn't work, and we're able to iterate and improve and innovate quickly. So that's just try to tie up some of those introductions. Now I want to do a quick question for each person. Please try to keep your answer to like a minute or two. But just to try to pull out a little bit more of my questions from your introductory comments, and then we'll see how much time we have, and we either go to the audience or probably we'll do like more of a speed round. Okay. So with that, Sunju, so I have to say, from the previous panel, I was quite interested in Casey Choi's comment about SK. And there's 6,000 petrol stations, or there are 3,000 petrol stations, gas stations. And I imagine every big company, or every company that has a lot of assets, like you guys, must have a lot of assets that could be used to help solve problems and things like that. And there's lots of technologies also out there that could be applied through your assets or working with you and your assets to deliver a much better outcome. And I'm just curious, so you must be looking at a lot of these different technologies and things. How do you evaluate a new technology? How do you evaluate a project and decide where to allocate these resources?
Thank you, Christoph. Yeah, in KT there are so many. In KT there are more than 1,000 solutions based in technology. Yeah, so before we choosing the technology solution, we try to understand the resident and who are living the proposed site. The most important thing is to understand the resident life and their needs and communicate with them constantly. You talk about the measurement about technology. Sometimes we choose the technology, but sometimes the residents don't want the technology. So sometimes we withdraw the technology and we upgrade the technology for the resident. So we interview the resident, how is he satisfied for your life, and after, if they don't satisfy our technology, we withdraw and we upgrade the technology. Yeah.
Excellent, thank you very much. In-Chen, I'm just curious. So your charts I found very interesting, and I'm curious in China, do you have any insight as to roughly what the age breakdown of that giving is? So it's clearly increasing, an interesting trend, and it's getting up to almost what your GDP growth is in China, roughly. So I'm curious, is it young? Is it older? Do you have any insight in that?
Well, I think the last point I had made on the breakdown for online, I think for online it's roughly I think 30-40%. I have to go back to check the numbers, but I think it's 40% younger versus the rest of the individuals. It's still gonna skew much more, and then the rest of that is gonna be more at our age. I think what the generation that's missing in China versus in the others is the kind of what would be called the baby boomers in the U.S. Right? That was the backbone of U.S. giving. That generation in China didn't have the resources or that culture, and so that's kind of been a skipped generation.
And is most of that giving, is it cash money, or is there also engagement? Are you able to coordinate donation, time donation?
And that's the difficulty. So China, I think, faces a few challenges on individual donations. One is the whole tax, and when you give an individual donation, do you get any benefit out of that? That currently there is something in the tax laws, but it's very difficult to get applied, and so therefore it would be out of your own pocket. So that's one, it's a disincentive. The secondly, in terms of how you give, traditionally you have to give to foundations. You could give to NGOs directly if you knew, but the channels were quite indirect before. So now that's one of the things that online now allows through these project-based giving, where you can directly give to what you want. But then that's still skewing towards the younger generation that knows how to activate and how to reach out to those projects.
Interesting. Okay, and then Soojin. So I'm kind of curious, in the early days, so you actually took in some angel funding, essentially. You also had some grants, which and most of those are government, but then you have like an X Prize type of thing coming in as well, which I find, these are interesting, and some of these are novel, new approaches. They also can kind of play into crowdfunding and crowd activation, towards, trying to solve some of these problems. So I'm kind of curious about the corporate side of this. So in the non-impact startup space and the tech investing space, there's interest from corporations to do incubation programs, accelerator programs, to bring in ideas and to bring in technologies and things. Is there a role for that, do you believe, in like corporate CSR programs to work with people like you, startups, and deploy capital, but also then kind of achieve their CSR objectives, working in cooperation with startups?
Sure, that will be really lovely. We try to approach some of the corporations that can be a good fit. For example, because we are working only for the software, infrastructure, hardware, and teacher training, and all those things, actually, there is a really great, amazing players in the field. So I believe that we are not very successful so far. We are just working hard and just go to the leading path of that as much as possible. But so far, the reason we survived is we are really open to ask for collaboration, ask for partnership, ask for money, funding, investment. And I believe that we don't have any certain idea what is the best money for that. If that money can help us to achieve what we want to prove to the world, and if this money or resource can be helpful to scale it in more rapid speed, everything will be really appreciated and welcome.
Okay, thank you very much. And then Lon, in terms of the future of blockchain, you mentioned in multiple ways that I think that it's going to play a role in charity. How much of its impact do you believe is in the efficiency, like the reducing overheads, cost savings, versus creating new ways for people to engage and increasing the amount of giving, the amount of, because is there a way to link people more directly with the outcomes through the blockchain or through some of these other technologies you mentioned?
Yeah, the blockchain is a means to an end, but in a lot of the programs that you can have is that, for example, you can make use of the mobile app as a social app, and part of the social app you have a payment system where you could actually pay contribution to the charity cause, and from there the management of those balance is managed by the blockchain, and therefore it has more efficiency and cost efficiency in managing this. I think managing money is obviously the biggest challenge that any charitable organization will have, right? So that is where it's going to reduce the cost substantially. And then moving on further from that is that, the blockchain is not just about, as I said earlier, not just about managing money as a ledger to keep account of the flow of money or flow of credits, but it also does a lot more things as a support system. For example, it helps you in the record keeping of your processes, the reports that you have from the field, and all sorts of data. You can actually put it in there, and it remains immutable as a record. And because of that, it is something where you cannot change the record and therefore cannot fraud the system. I mean, in any organization, you need to make sure that all information are as true as it should be, and true from any tainting from anyone inside the company. So this will definitely reduce the cost of operation as well as the capital costs in deploying systems, technological systems in any organization for that matter.
Great, thank you. Okay, so in the interest of schedule, I guess we're really at the end. So I'm going to do a very quick round. So if you could please just answer between 1 to 5 words to each of the following questions. Maybe we'll just go, maybe start with Lan and then move towards me. Each person, just give your, don't think too much, don't, you know, but give me your gut feeling. I mean, there's no right answer. These are future questions. So the first question, so how big will online crowd fundraising be in 10 years as a percentage of the total?
Well, I think it should be 75% to 80%.
Okay. Okay. Soojin?
I totally agree with him. Yeah, it will be really large.
Okay. In-Chen?
I think I'll still be a consultant. It's going to be varied by market, and I think in a market like China, I think you could get up to 30-40%, but I think in other markets we may get closer to 70.
Okay. So it'll be held back a little bit in China. It won't go as far. Okay.
Yeah, more than 50%.
More than 50%. And that's a global figure, or is that global figure? Yeah. Okay. Okay, interesting. So that's a takeaway for United Way. I mean, that right now, a place like China, we're at a very low base, and it's going to get a lot bigger and very soon. Next question. So do we think that I heard a little bit about project-based? So again, as a percentage of donations, what percentage would be payroll-based, or to like a United Way, versus how much will be project-based? Individual project where you understand the story.
Well, I would hazard a guess here. Perhaps maybe 15% to the management of the organization, versus 85% being pushed down to the projects.
Okay.
I believe that it will be near to 100, especially if it's a form of online donation, because it is the only way to discuss about the story.
So you find the story is more engaging and more likely to result in...
I believe that will be the key of online donation system. So provide a story and give a feeling of involvement through that story. And
excellent.
I hope that it is true, because the companies like us will be more and more rely on that type of project-based donation.
In-Chen?
I would say mostly project-based. The one challenge I think will be, I'm just going to say 90% project-based.
Okay. Sanju?
Yeah, we talked about this while we are breakfast. In our company, not project based.
Okay. Okay. Well, I think that's pretty much all we have time for. So we'll call that a wrap, I guess. So thank you, everyone. Thank you for each of the panelists. I appreciate your thoughts and insights. Very interesting perspective. I hope you guys found something interesting here, and look forward to the rest of the conference with you.
Thank you. 네, 다시 한번 지금까지 수고해 주신 연사분들에게 큰 박수 부탁드리겠습니다.